Long ago, when the land was young, and the gods walked freely among people, there stood a prosperous village in the heart of what is now Kenya. This village, blessed with fertile soil and abundant harvests, was home to the Luo people, who called their settlement Kadem. Situated in a gentle valley, surrounded by rolling hills, Kadem thrived where others struggled. Year after year, while neighboring villages battled drought and famine, Kadem's granaries remained full, its livestock healthy, and its people content. The elders attributed their fortune to the ancestor spirits who watched over them, but in truth, they had forgotten that prosperity is a gift that demands generosity in return. As their wealth grew, so did their pride. What began as gratitude for their good fortune hardened into entitlement. Strangers seeking shelter were turned away. Requests for grain from struggling neighboring villages were denied. The people of Kadem built higher fences around their compounds and posted guards at the paths leading to their village. "Why should we share what we have worked so hard to build?" the village chief would say. "Let others tend their lands as diligently as we tend ours." The elders, who once counseled compassion, now nodded in agreement. Only Nyaima, the village healer whose name meant daughter of water, dared to speak against this growing hardness of heart. "The rain falls on all lands," she would remind them. "The sun shines for everyone. Who are we to hoard what the gods have freely given?" But her words fell on ears deafened by prosperity, and the villagers dismissed her warnings as the naive fears of a girl who had seen too little of the world. One evening, as the golden sun sank behind the hills and the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, a stranger arrived at the village gate. She was ancient beyond reckoning, her back bent like a bow, her skin wrinkled as dried leather, her hair white as lake foam. She leaned heavily on a gnarled walking stick, and her tattered clothes hung loosely on her frail frame. "Please," she called to the guards in a voice that rasped like dry leaves. "I seek only shelter for the night and a morsel of food to quiet my hunger. I have traveled far and have far yet to go." The guards exchanged glances before the taller one replied, "Our chief has forbidden us to admit strangers. There are villages half a day's walk from here. Seek your charity there." "But night approaches," the old woman pleaded, gesturing to the darkening sky, "and I am weary to my bones." "That is not our concern," said the second guard, turning his back on her. "Our duty is to our people, not to every wanderer who passes by." The old woman's eyes, which had seemed dull and rheumy, suddenly sharpened. She stood straighter, and something in her gaze made the guards step back. "Is this truly the hospitality of Kadem? I have heard tales of your prosperity. Surely you can spare a corner by your fire and a crust of bread for one who asks so little." "Be gone, old woman," the first guard commanded, raising his spear, "before we decide your persistence deserves punishment." At that moment, Nyaima approached, returning from gathering herbs in the forest. She saw the confrontation and hurried forward, her medicine pouch swinging at her hip. "What happens here?" she demanded, looking from the guards to the stranger. "Nothing that concerns you, healer," replied the guard. "Return to your hut." But Nyaima had already seen the hunger in the old woman's eyes and the dismissal in the guard's stance. Stepping between them, she addressed the stranger directly. "Grandmother, I have little, but what I have I will share. Come with me to my humble dwelling." The old woman smiled, her face transforming with gratitude. "Blessings upon you, daughter. At least one heart in Kadem remembers the old ways." Together they walked away from the gate, the guards mocking laughter following them down the path. In Nyaima's small hut at the village edge, she prepared a simple meal of porridge and wild greens. As they ate by the light of a small fire, the old woman spoke of her travels across the land, of villages both generous and mean, of droughts and floods, births and deaths. The world is changing, she said, gazing into the flames. People forget that they are but caretakers of the earth, not its masters. They build walls instead of bridges, hoard instead of share. Nyaima nodded sadly. It was not always so in Kadem. Once we welcomed all who came in peace, but prosperity has turned our hearts to stone. And what becomes of stone when the waters rise? The old woman asked mysteriously. Before Nyaima could answer, a commotion erupted outside. Angry voices approached her hut, and suddenly the door was thrust open. The village chief stood there, flanked by elders and guards. "Nyaima," he thundered, "you dare defy our laws by harboring this outsider?" Nyaima rose calmly to face him. "I follow a higher law than yours, Chief Oteno, the law of hospitality that our ancestors honored." "Your ancestors," the chief sneered. "Always you speak of the old ways. The old ways would have kept us poor and hungry. Our new strength comes from protecting what is ours." "And what is truly yours?" The old woman's voice cut through the tension like lightning through storm clouds. She too had risen, but something about her had changed. She seemed taller now, her back no longer bent, her presence filling the small hut with an inexplicable power. "Who are you to question me in my own village?" demanded the chief, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. "I am one who has watched your village since it was nothing but a handful of huts beside a stream," the woman replied. "I am one who blessed your first fields and guided your ancestors to this valley, and I am one who now finds no place at your fire despite your abundance." A murmur ran through the gathered elders. The chief's face darkened with anger, and perhaps a touch of fear. "Remove her," he ordered the guards. "Take her beyond our boundaries and ensure she does not return." The guards hesitated, sensing something dangerous in the stranger's steady gaze. But at the chief's repeated command, they stepped forward. "Stop!" cried Nyaima, but it was too late. As the first guard touched the old woman's arm, the earth beneath their feet trembled. Outside, the sky, which had been clear at sunset, suddenly darkened. Clouds gathered with unnatural speed, black and heavy with rain. "You have made your choice," the old woman said, her voice no longer frail but resonant with power. "You have chosen wealth over compassion, walls over welcome. So be it." With those words, she struck the ground once with her staff. The trembling intensified, becoming a violent shaking that threw people to their knees. Cracks appeared in the packed earth floor of the hut. "What sorcery is this?" gasped the chief as he struggled to maintain his footing. "Not sorcery," replied the woman, who now glowed with an inner light that revealed her true form. Tall and majestic, clothed in shimmering blue that flowed like water. "Justice." She turned to Nyaima, who alone remained standing, frozen in awe. "You alone remembered the virtue of compassion. Therefore, you alone shall be spared." With her staff, she touched Nyaima's forehead. "Go now, climb to the high ground, and do not look back until the sun rises." Thunder cracked overhead, and rain began to fall. Not the gentle, life-giving rain of the growing season, but a deluge that pummeled the earth with unnatural force. The ground continued to shake, and now the cracks widened into fissures from which water began to surge. Nyaima fled as the hut collapsed behind her. All through the village, similar scenes unfolded. Buildings crumbling, ground splitting open, water rushing up from below even as it poured from above. The screams of the villagers mingled with the roar of the tempest. Against the divine command, Nyaima paused at the top of the hill and looked back. In the flashes of lightning, she saw her village sinking, water filling the valley like a cup. The old woman, no, the goddess, stood at the center of the maelstrom, her staff raised high, her form gradually dissolving into the waters that now claimed Kadem. By morning, where a proud village had stood, there was only a perfectly round lake, its waters dark and still under the risen sun. Nyaima wept at the sight, mourning her people even as she acknowledged the justice of their fate. From that day forward, she traveled the land, telling the story of Kadem that became Simbi Nyaima, the sunken village, warning all who would listen that prosperity without compassion invites divine retribution, and that no community can truly thrive that closes its heart to the stranger at its gate. And the lake remains to this day, a watery grave and an eternal reminder that what we refuse to give freely may be taken by force, and that the gods are always watching, sometimes disguised as those who need our help the most.